Bronn kept his chair where the light fell long, near the windows of Tyrion's old solar where he had no call to sit. The imp was gone. The door-nailed wooden lion above the mantel split where a crossbow quarrel had thunk and stuck once upon a time. No one had repaired it. No one had repaired much. King's Landing mended itself like a scab in summer. Dry, brittle around the edges, liable to crack if pinched. He weighed a coin on his knuckles and then let it drop, snatched it, sent it dancing again. He liked the sound of the city below. Wheels, hooves, shouts, a woman laughing too loudly, a man cursing as he lifted something too heavy, and he liked that the city didn't know him until it had to. A Sel's word lived longest in the seam between fame and forgetfulness. He preferred the seam, but fame had come on the heels of wildfire and iron. A knight's spur biting into his heel like a joke, he told himself in the dark. The door brushed open without a knock. Silk rustled, a powdery scent of violets that did not belong to this room or this man. "I have it on good authority that you refused the Lady Lollys Stokeworth's hand," Varys purred. "A hand that comes with land and a title, as hands often do. It seems ungrasped." Bronn didn't stop the coin. He let it walk. Hands can pinch. The lady's got a mother. She does the pinching. The queen as well, and she pinches with others' fingers. And yet a safe seat at a safe distance from danger. Varys drifted toward the mantel, peered at the splintered lion as if it hid some secret. One can grow stout on such safety. "I don't fancy stout," Bronn said. "I fancy living, and I don't care to be fat meat for dogs when the queen decides she's bored of me." Varys turned, hands folded, eyes vague and razor. "Then live for me, Ser Bronn. There is a bird in the south. She sings sweetly and is caged. Many have whispered to the cage, a few have rattled it. Should someone wise and quick of hand arrive while others are rattling, the cage may open in a manner more pleasing. I don't catch birds for free. You would not be catching her, escorting, and not for free." Varys laid a pouch upon the table with the heavy comfort of dull gold. "Whisperings are that certain games are afoot in Dorne. All who play say they came to drink the prince's sweet wines. Some do, some mean to spill blood. I would not have the bird's blood spilled." Bronn rolled the coin once more, flicked it, caught it, let it rest. "Which bird?" Varys only smiled. "The one with golden feathers." He left the pouch where it lay, as if it were something common. "Sail from the Rosby Quay tonight. 2 men with you whom you trust not to weep. No Vanevs. Your name is not your name. You are a courier with a letter from the royal mother to the princely father. And when you arrive, you are no one. No one hears you, but your eyes hear everything. If it is stillness, you leave. If it is not stillness, you move the bird from the storm." "The queen doesn't send me anywhere," Bronn said. "The queen, no." Varys tilted his head. "But I do. I am, alas, not a queen. I don't pinch with others' fingers. I prefer to pay with my own." Bronn looked at the pouch again, then at the window where the air smelled of tar and salt, faint under the city odors. "South, then. South." Varys's smile thinned. "You're very good at making knots in other men's nets, Ser Bronn. One only hopes you do not forget which knots are yours." When the eunuch's soft tread had vanished, Bronn cinched the pouch under his belt, down where weight meant truth, and went to find 2 men who did not weep. They were not hard to find. The dockside held 1,000 who would laugh one day and howl the next and still keep their feet while the water slopped at the pilings and the tar creaked in its seams. He took an archer who could split 2 birds on the wing and a butcher who had learned he could cut the living with more profit than carcasses. He called them Tom and Tuller because that way they would answer quickly and not bite at him with their stories. The 3 of them boarded a coaster out of Driftmark painted to look poorer than she was, and the captain asked no questions save whether they preferred the deck or the hold and if they had any silver to spare when docking at Sunspear. The sea rolled like a big belly and showed them old scars in the wood when it grew angry. The butcher retched over the rail and laughed at himself and retched again. The archer slept like a cat. Bronn didn't sleep much. He watched the gray backs of waves, the way the sky changed its mind 3 times before noon, and let Varys's words roll in his head. a bird with golden feathers. He had never believed in birds. He believed in hungry men and full purses and the quick luck that shot one and filled the other. But he'd heard a name in the coin's ring when it hit the table. Myrcella. The wind-blown benches at Sunspear had slats worn smooth by 100 sellswords. Bronn did not sit there. He didn't drink where sellswords drank unless he wanted to hire them. He walked through heat that felt like a hand and watched children splash in long pools. He watched oranges fall and split open. He watched women with painted eyes and veils black as their hair. He was no one. He stared at walls and windows because walls and windows watched everything. Prince Doran's water gardens were a dream of stone and shade. So it was said, but dreams were always smaller when you could put your hand upon the stone and feel the grit. Bronn went there with a letter he had not read and a token seal that would pass as official so long as no one was foolish enough to break it. He could smell the water before he saw it, and the skin along his neck tightened at the childish shrieks that were not fear, for once, but delight. He saw her first as a pale shape among bright things. Gold hair in the southern sun can look like a promise. His practiced I saw the guards before he saw the girl. Shilu aimed over the water speaking to a boy with hair like the desert at dusk. Petals floated on the pool like stars. She reached to scoop one and shrieked as the boy flicked water at her. She laughed and flicked back, the gesture careful, the smile not. Careful girls are taught where to sit and how to hold their hands. True laughter had a way of clapping its own hands. Ser, the guard in orange and rust, said it with as little warmth as the stone. Your business. A letter from the queen, Bronn said, because the lie was closest to truth. He held it out. The guard looked at the broken lion above the seal and didn't like it. He liked it enough to take it to an older man with a white streak in his beard and shoulders wide enough to be a wall themselves. Ario Hoda, the butcher whispered, and Bronn did not whisper back. Ario looked at him the way a man looks at rain, measuring whether it will drench or pass. Then he inclined his head one bare notch. Wait. He waited. Waiting is a kind of sugared poison. Fools lick it, men like Bronn swallow it only when they must. While he waited, he let his eyes hear. The boy in the pool was Tristane. The girl was not queen and might never be. The prince with gout did not show himself for messages. The fat men in the shade of the orange trees spoke soft and made tight circles with their fingers. Servants moved like careful fish. The guards were bored, and bored men looked to be entertained by trouble. The girl in gold glanced once. It wasn't much. A quick slide, a flicker. He saw that she was appraising him. He smiled the soft smile he used on old mares and stable boys. She didn't smile back. But later, when the letter had been taken and he was dismissed to the chambers the prince provided for messengers who were not what they seemed, a girl came with a tray of pomegranates and crushed mint and looked at him from under her lashes. Her Grace will walk again by the pools this afternoon, she said to the tray. Will she? Bronn answered to the mint. She trips sometimes, the girl said. Tell her to watch where she puts her feet. The girl went. Bronn's archer plucked at his bowstring until it sang. Tuller sharpened a knife with loving patience. In the hall below, a courtier's chuckle sounded like a knife stealing out of its sheath. He listened to the silence left after it and found it was nervous. It was not stillness. He'd felt it intense before battles, in taverns before a brawl, in the pause before a woman said yes or no. Something was coiling. When Myrcella walked again, she had a different guard at her back. A woman this time with a narrow face. The boy Tristane held a book in his hand and forgot to read it. Bronn stood far enough away to let her forget him. He didn't mind being forgotten. But when the woman with the narrow face turned to speak to another guard, Myrcella's eyes slid again, deliberate as a finger drawing a line in dust. He went down. He did not bow much. Bows got in the way of movement. Your Grace. Ser Messenger, she said. He let the corners of his mouth twitch. Ser no one. Don't get used to it. I am not sure I like that name. It won't last. Names change more quickly in the south. Things rot faster, too. He looked beyond her to where the far end of the garden smudged with olive trees and hot rock, and in the smudge a pale motion. Not guards. Riders. "Rot is ugly," she said primly, and then spoiled it by smiling a little. "Even if it makes the oranges sweeter. Sweet rots quickest." The riders were nothing yet. He leaned on a pillar and risked a question. "Do you enjoy your books, Your Grace?" "I'm not allowed to be bored," she said, with a flick of girlish stubbornness. "It isn't proper. I've done dozens of improper things in my life and I enjoyed most of them." Bronn watched the smudge become 2 spots, then 3. "Are there many who come and go at night?" She stiffened, a ripple. She had been taught to give nothing to questions. But she was young and youths leak truth. "I am not awake at night. Proper girls do not go out after dark." "Then I must be mistaken." The woman with the narrow face touched Myrcella's elbow and steered her toward the far pool where the shade was heavier. Bronn let them go and turned away to where the windblown sat under their painted awning by the outer walls. Men who meant to leave for the Boneway drank as if thirsty pitchers had unrolled their tongues. Men who meant to stay in the prince's wage drank as if summer were endless. He made a knot in a net. He watched long enough to know which men looked at which places when a shadow moved. He put his archer where shadows moved and Tuller where men grabbed knives too quickly. Then he waited again. In the morning 2 new lords arrived and smiled too much. In the afternoon, the girl with the tray spoke again to the mint. "The Lady Ariane has asked for new perfumes from Volantis. She rides tonight with friends to test them beneath the stars." "She must not like her bed," Bronn said. "She likes it well enough when she shares it. Not with her friends," the girl said and flitted off. The court complained of the heat. Heat muffled complaints. Men do less under hot lids. It was clever of the Dornish to build their lives around water. It lulled, it glittered, it made a veil. That night, beneath the veil, the plan unwound. Pale banner like a moonflower, a small crown wrapped in silk, a horse's creak under a light saddle, stealth that was not stealth to any ear that had sat outside a tent while an enemy moved. Bronn was already by his horse's head when the first of the riders slipped beneath the orange branches. It would have been better to take the crown before it touched any head, but better still not to be obvious. He had learned in 1,000 camps that if you must be seen doing what you would have done anyway. He led his horse out to the bone-white road toward the gate with his archer yawning behind him and Tuller Siu Rsing at his saddle girth, and passed in the opposite direction to the slim file of riders whose leader rode like it was a dance. He smelt the perfume before he saw her face. Ariane Martell had an air of someone who wanted to be shook hard and kissed harder and then obeyed. He had no intention of doing any of those things, but the air was an intention of its own. The girl in gold rode among them, cloaked. Bronze eye snagged on the fold of fabric where a softer gleam shone. It didn't take a lord's wits to know silk wrapped something. When a rider slipped because her horse stepped on a stone and the silk shifted, he saw a flash of a circlet, pale as a moon. Kings make smaller to fit a child's head. Ariohoda was not there to say no. The prince was not there to say anything. The riders were out. The veil of water did nothing now. The Boneway runs black. He turned his horse as if thinking better of a nighttime canter. He let his head droop as if drunker than he was. His archer plodded, Tuller swore. The world narrowed to silver sand and black olive and moonlight on rock. When the riders slowed for a narrow cut, he sharpened. He had no order from Varys to do this. Varys had told him to watch and then move the bird from the storm if storm broke. He had not been told where to set the new perch. That was fine. In his life, people died because orders were stupid. He preferred a plan that grew like a vine finding stone. There are shouts in the hills when you expect silence. The sound of a knife being pulled is the same as a breath if you are too late. The man behind the riders was too late. Bronn heard the hiss and smelled the iron taste of men drawing in air. He had chosen his place not by the crown but by where the rocks funneled men. Shadows loomed above on the low ledges, not Ariane's. He did not need to know their names to know their meaning. Not Doran's men. Not any prince's men. The kind of men who ride crests at night and come down like slate on a glass. Down! He shouted, not at the riders but at his own, because he would have them move when he moved. The first blow at night is the last if you hesitate. He was already on the ledge, scrambling on all fours like a child upstairs, knife in his teeth, when the shadow above him became a weight. The knife in the shadow's fist flashed low, aiming for neck. Decent work, but Bronn wasn't there. He threw his shoulder into the man's legs and heard a bone break. Something thumped to his left, Tom or Tuller or someone unlucky, while the horses below squealed high and sick. "Protect the princess!" A voice shouted from below, thin with fear and salt. That was not Hoda. That was the voice of a man who had never protected anything. Another man came at Bronn low. Bronn went lower. He liked the trick of being where men didn't expect him. His knife flicked and found thigh and tendon. The man went down with a noise like ripping cloth. Someone else screamed. A horse flailed.
À ta blade sang.
In the corner of his eye, he caught a face like a piece of pale glass, thin and beautiful and bored even as he struck. They named him Darkstar. Bronn did not care what they named him. He cared that he moved well and that his eyes looked for the crown and then for the flaw in the guard that stood between him and it. He would have the girl disfigured to make a point. That was a good plan from a certain angle. Good plans are only good until someone else changes them. Bronn jumped before he knew the step. The pale blade drew an arc that would have cut a child neat from ear to jaw. Bronn's forearm banged it aside and the shock ran up his shoulder into his teeth. He had been hit harder by falling timber. He didn't try to match strength. He hooked the man's wrist and laughed because he couldn't help it, and he kicked him in the knee. When Darkstar reeled, he jabbed him in the eyes with 2 fingers. No honor in it. Honor gets you buried. When the pale man staggered, he cut his ribs deep and didn't stop to see if it was death. A victor's biggest mistake is waiting to watch the light go out. There wasn't time to learn whether the pale man was a victor. Bronn shoved the girl hard so she fell into sand and stink of horse and shield, and he shouted again. "Tom, take the pretty boy. Tuller, the girl. Move." Arian's face was a storm, outrage and fear and something like respect tangled in it. "You." "Later," Bronn said and swung. A man described a slow question with his sword and Bronn answered by cutting his throat. He yanked the girl up and over the saddle, and the boy Tristane bleated. No, you can't." In the way boys who have never been told no bleat. Tom struck the boy once blunt with the bow to quiet him, and then lifted him bodily onto a horse because boys are light and easier to move than objections. Behind, the narrow cut filled with the weight of Hoda and men who moved like boulders with mines. He was late, which saved the girl's face and lost the crown's secrecy. Shouts crashed like oars. The crown lay in the sand, haloed in spilled wine from a shattered flask someone had brought. Someone would call that clever later a pretty symbol, crown in blood. Bronn did not have the patience for later. They went up and into the hills where men who did not know the ground died. Bronn had never known Dorne, but he had known hills and brambles and men in them since he was old enough to climb to a sheepfold and steal a ewe. Behind, Arian's friends scattered like coin on a table. Some were caught because Areo had a hand easy with such catches. Some were not because the night had a mouth and swallowed them. The man with pale eyes cursed and wept as he tried to ride blind, and Bronn hoped he lived long enough to trouble someone else. They made a fire high and small, no more than a thumb. The girl shivered without complaint. Sand gritted in the wound beneath her ear where Darkstar's blade had kissed instead of bitten. It would scar. Scars were better. Teachers than septas. "You're bleeding," Bronn said. "I hate it," she said through teeth. "Blood is sticky. Why do people write poems about it? People write poems about all sorts of foolishness. Names are worse." He tamped the cloth against the cut, not gentle, because gentle here was a lie. "What do you think your name is now?" "Princess," she said like a test. "Lady. Lannister." She glanced at Tom, at Tuller, at Bronn's hands. "Myrcella." "Bird," Bronn said, and she made a face. Then he said, "Alive," and her face changed. "Are you stealing me?" she asked. "I thought they were stealing you. Hard to keep track. You saved me. I saved you from the people who were saving you from the people who had you," he said. "Congratulations, you are wanted." She watched him. There was Lannister in her gaze when she wasn't trying to please anyone. "Who are you?" "A man who doesn't like pale men with sharp swords cutting up little girls at night." He looked at her chin, set and stubborn. Then at the boy bound with a strip of saddle leather where his protest would have been, eyes bright with helpless rage. "And a man who thinks that if you are about to be made into a flag for a storm, you might prefer a roof." "What roof?" she asked. He weighed a coin between two knuckles and set it down, as if it were a word. "Yours." "I don't have a roof," she said almost sadly. "Everywhere I sleep belongs to someone else." "Time to change it, then." It was not the time for words. Dawn teased the edges of rock with gray string. Aereo would come because Aereo always came, not fast but inevitable. Prince Doran would send letters and then men and then more letters. Bronn had no desire to be caught between letters and men. He had the girl. He had the boy. He had two men who did not weep and a bag with gold. That would do. They ghosted the hills while the heat grew beneath their feet until it felt like walking on bread oven stones. They found a dry arroyo and moved in the shadow. The archer went ahead like a fox slipping under fences. In the second hour, when the sun was a hammer and everything in Bronn's head said water, water, don't be a fool, they came on a goat boy leading 3 beasts with bells and an old woman with eyes like raisins and skin like a walnut. She took one look at the hair of the girl and spat sidewise. "Pretty trouble," she said. "Less trouble if it learns to walk in shade," Bronn answered. He flicked a coin. The old woman's hand was quick for one so dried. "There's a spring I'm paying to remember. Memory is dearer than that," she said, picked her teeth with the coin, and then nodded toward a notch in the rock. "There. And if you are not wanting to be followed, don't be stupid about your feet. People always leave a tail of stones behind them." The spring was a trickle that sang as if it were a river. They drank like beasts. The boy Trystane refused for a while because his mouth would not fit around his pride. Then he wept without a sound and drank because thirst humbles princes and butchers alike. "You cannot take her," he said later, when his voice came back to him like a begrudged loan. "I did," Bronn said. "You don't understand," Trystane said. "My father will. Send more men like the men who tried to cut her? Or bigger men who say please before they cut?" Bronn shrugged. "I'm fond of your father from what I've seen. He sits still and thinks while other men strut and talk. Thinking men are dangerous. He might even be kind. Kind men are dangerous, too. They think kindness means they have the right to decide your life for you. One way or another, boy, you're both pieces on someone's board." "My name is Trystane," the boy said. "Names," Bronn said lightly. "Dangerous things." Myrcella looked at the notch of sky above the rocks and then down at Bronn. "If we go to King's Landing, they'll put me in a bedchamber with bolts," she said. "If we go to Dorne, they'll put me in a bedchamber with cushions. And both will be cages. You said a roof, that's mine. Get yourself a roof, then." He looked at her. "You can make one out of words if you speak them right, and you can hold it up with steel." "You mean to make me queen," she said softly. "I mean to give you something no one can take with a letter. Maybe that's a crown. Maybe it's something else." He flicked his eyes at the boy. "What would your father do if I send you back?" "Imprison you," the boy said first, honest, then winced. "My apologies. He might also send you to the wall, or cut your head off, or send you to parley with my cousins until you die of boredom." Bronn grinned. "The boredom might be the worst of those. I have no taste for black wool. I look ill in it." "What are you thinking?" Myrcella asked him. "That a girl's name is a better roof than a lady's. That a wife's name is stronger than a ward's. That a man no one expected to be anywhere near a crown is less easy to lean on than some pliant lord. That if you attach yourself to me now, the same pinchers that would pinch me at Stokeworth will be wary. They'll have to show their hands to pluck you away." She knew some of what he said. She knew enough. "A husband. A promise," he corrected. "Dorne is clever with such things. They know betrothals like they know water. They know when to pour and when to sip. Some vows are knots. Some are ribbons. We can make ours a knot and a ribbon both. I won't bed you. I won't even ask. You're a child and I'm not a monster. He saw the flinch when he said bed. The thing that had happened in the riot lived like a shadow near her. Not hers but close. He lowered his voice. I'll be a sword between you and other men's plans. And in return you'll put your name like a wall around me. You want a roof. I want a castle. Everyone honest has a hunger. We can feed both if we mind our manners. The boy made a low sound. This is absurd. This is life, Bronn said. He looked at Myrcella. You want Trystane? He's a sweet boy. He'll make you fat with poems and figs. But he won't keep knives out of your bedchamber. I will. Myrcella's chin tilted a little like her mother's. The gesture had steel in it and a child's uncertainty both. If I promise myself to you, she said slowly, they will call it treason. They'll call it all sorts of things. I like to be called things. People who are calling you names are using their mouths for that instead of for shouting orders. He sat back on his heels and let her see that he wasn't leaning. You can say no. She thought about saying no. He saw the thought drift like a fish under the skin of her face. And then she looked up through the crack of sky and said, Find me a September. It was an old traveler's shrine tucked like an apology into a fold of cliff. The stones smelled of wax and dust. A girl's chalk-scratched prayer curled pale on the wall where everyone who came added their hope to a brittle swarm. The septon was a man with rosaries worn thin and a shoulder gone sideways with age. His hands were dry as paper and his eyes kinder than was good for him. Bronn did not charm him. He told him plainly, We need a betrothal witnessed, not consummated. Promise. She is who she is. You know her face. The septon's mouth moved around his tongue like it was heavy. This is not a market pledge, sire. I've made those too. Bronn felt the old man's gaze tick over him like a bead. Don't like this? Then refuse. Send me away. I'll take her to another, and you'll still have done nothing to stop whatever the next man means to do. Who are you to speak so to the gods? The boy demanded, flushed. I wasn't speaking to the gods, Bronn said. I was speaking to the man. The gods don't need my advice. The septon's clumsy shoulder hitched. You claim this marriage will not be consummated. Claim? I'm telling you, the girl's got years before that. I can count. The old man nodded. Then I will write your names in my book. Names written in the presence of the seven have weight. He laid a hand on Myrcella's head. Child, do you consent? Myrcella's voice was small and careful. Yes. And you, sire? Yes, Bronn said. He did not flinch when the septon made him speak the words. He'd spoken words before. Words can be anchors or chains. He was betting on anchors. They drank stale wine by the shrine. Bronn felt the world change around him the way a dog feels a storm, prickling a hush. Every small hair trained toward the horizon. The boy stared as if he'd seen his own face turn into another's in a mirror. You meant to marry my princess yourself, Bronn told him not unkindly. I intended to wait until the world allowed me to do so, Trystane said. That's a very Dornish thing to say. It is a very prudent thing to say, the boy said. Prudent men die like the rest, Bronn said. They just do it without ever having had the thing they wanted. You can't keep her. Trystane's voice shook. Dorn will not. Dorn can come and talk to her, Bronn said. To my wife. The word landed like a stone plopping in a deep well. Myrcella swallowed. She did not look at Bronn when she said, almost in a whisper, If we are discovered on the road, will you leave me? No, he said. Will you leave Tom? Tuller? She asked. If leaving them saves you, he said. She nodded once. She understood he was honest. It is frightening to be kept honest. She stood and held out her hand to the boy who would have been her husband in a better, softer tale. Trystane. He looked like he might spit or strike. Then he stood without taking her hand and bowed in a way that was older than the lines on his face. Princess, he said, be happy. She was new to lying. He saw her try to shape her face into happy and not get the shape right. Bronn turned away. He had rope to coil and saddles to cinch and a road to choose. Word outran them. Word always does. In Skirich and Vaith and the long dry villages where the wind had been given nothing to play with but dust, men heard that the princess had been crowned, that she had fled, that she had been stabbed, that the prince's men had fallen upon her, that brigands had carried her off for ransom, that the pale knight had cut her ear off and swore to finish the rest, that she had slain 3 men herself with a hairpin. Truth threaded through those like a needle and drew them together just enough to clothe a figure that might almost be Myrcella if you squinted. Bronn didn't care which cloak men put on the truth. He cared where the men who wore those cloaks placed their feet. He watched the dust on the road behind him for the flat gray mark that meant 10 men riding hard. Ahead, the boneway narrowed between old rocks like teeth. He could take the prince's pass westward, through the gorges, but those were watched. He could cut more east and skim the Sea of Dorne, then north up the King's Road. Dorne is a honeycomb. He settled for a path that ran under low sandstone walls crowded with thornbush and rat nests and knew the men who would wait in turnings. He bought a fisher's boat in Ghost Hill with coin that came out of his own purse, because he didn't plan to fight the prince's household guard in a place with echoes. In the morning, a sail appeared like an eye opening on the water far to seaward. A long ship, not Dornish. The sea has no borders for longships. Bronn watched a curl of smoke gouge the horizon from the shoreside where villages that grew oysters and girls grew alike, and he cursed the Iron Men for their inconveniently simple hungers. He had no love for raiders, but he had always liked an enemy who told you exactly what he meant to take. They held to the coast, then cut into the Mander estuary at night, little and unlovely. The reeds there whispered of frogs that would drown the world in noise if given the chance. The archer slept with one eye open and the other pretending an eye patch. Tuller dreamt and said the names of sausages with tenderness.
Myrcella no.
Longer cried except when she was so tired she stumbled and the cry squeezed out of her like a small rabbit. Bronn ignored her tears the way one ignores a woman giving birth. The thing being born had to be born. They told people they were traders from salt pans going to Old Town for a better price on smoked eel, and they put the boy in a hood when they went among men. The boy hated it. Good. Hating makes princes real. It was a relief when the high tower came up like a white finger, unreal as chalk, because it meant that they were somewhere that had nothing to do with orange trees. It was not much of a relief because Old Town was busy with its own games. Maesters moved like dull rats. Novices stared at Myrcella's hair and then away as if she were a brazier too hot to stand near. The starry September rang with the faith's new hardness as if the bells had been quenched in vinegar. "This city smells better than King's Landing," Myrcella said as they threaded through fishmonger cries and the sky turned pewter with gulls. "Everything smells better than King's Landing," Bronn said. "Rot smells worse when it sits on a throne." He had not heard the name Sparrow before the way one hears a grinding wheel in the next room, vague and threatening, but he learned it in Old Town. Men murmured of a high septon torn down and another raised without jewels and without mercy. Women with bare feet preached near the piers and called men to purity and threw stones at a whore who took a customer in a shadow because even shadows belong to the gods. Evidently. Bronn wanted meat and quiet. He got neither. He found a septon who was not old enough to droop and not young enough to be stupid and put him in a room with Myrcella and let them talk about vows. The man came out looking as if he had lost something and gained something else. Good. Anyone who stood near Myrcella would have to lose something. He bought a cloak with the 7-pointed star sewn in simple cloth and put it over Myrcella when they walked. He liked watching people look and then decide to look at someone else. People who mess with the faith are either very brave or want to be seen. Bronn was neither. He sent no letters. He had no ravens to call his own, and if he had he still would have sent none. He preferred to appear before men before their letters informed them he was coming. He wanted to hit the city like summer thunder, sudden and noisy, not like the stink of a rotting fish that arrived days in advance. They rode north. The Rose Road's planks made a music like old teeth. The reach is fat and looks gentle. It folds small knives into its bread. The Tyrell men who came upon them near a sunflower field wore green that flashed yellow when they moved. They charged because charging is a joy young men like to give themselves. Bronn let them enjoy it until it became dangerous, and then he snapped the string of the lead rider's bow with a single arrow from Tom and cut the second from his saddle with an upward stroke that took the breath out of him like a bellyful of sand. When they had stopped enjoying themselves, they were reasonable. They escorted Bronn into a stand of tall oaks and suggested, with a many-syllabled politeness, that he should come to High Garden. "Later," Bronn said, "when I have something to trade that doesn't bleed." They didn't like that, but they didn't like the idea of cutting a princess more. The days of breaking pretty hostages in flower fields were not over, but they were not these boys' days. A letter arrived a day later, sweating in the hand of a man on a lathered horse. It smelled of roses if roses smelled like ink. Bronn didn't open it. He could smell Olenna Tyrell's spine in the way the seals were placed, double and neat, with the little thorn sign. He slid the letter into his knife belt and kept it there like a snake. Dangerous and perhaps useful if squeezed carefully. When they were 2 days shy of the city, nights were ugly with horn and torch. Bronn sent the archer to the hills to look with eyes that saw further than men like to admit sight can reach. Tom came back at dawn with a grin clipped short by caution. "White cloaks," he said. "2. And men in red and gold. And others black and rough. They're not marching together. They're circling. They're arguing without speaking." "Good," Bronn said softly. "Let them argue more." They slept the last night in a ditch with nettles that did not care who they stung. In the morning the road funneled them toward King's Landing, and its stink hit them like an old friend's breath. Myrcella's shoulders went square. She had learned to make them square. It sat upon her like too big mail. "I am not going to cry," she told no one. "Cry later when you can close the door," Bronn said. They were stopped in sight of the city where the Septri ruins from the riot still showed like a mouth missing teeth. The city had new teeth, iron ones. Men in house colors parted like bread for a wedge that moved slow and certain. Bronn knew that wedge. He knew the man at the point of it. Jaime Lannister sat his horse with his left hand on the reins, as if he had done it forever. The empty sleeve on his right had been bound well. It lay quiet. His face had less in it than it used to, as if happiness and anger alike had been scraped down to a smooth plank. "Ser Bronn," Jaime said. He did not raise his voice. He did not have to. Bronn watched the way the golden cloak behind Jaime bit down on a laugh that wanted to crawl out and make mischief. He watched the men in the red and gold look bored and afraid at once. The city's sound crawled out to them, a great low growl like a beast who had half slept and not eaten. "Ser Jaime," he said easy, "you look well, not too fat. And you look insolent," Jaime said. "As I remember. I make a habit of it." Jaime's gaze flicked to the girl. It did not flinch at the scar under her ear. He swallowed once. "Princess." "Uncle," she said. She did not herself know whether he meant it as rebuke or plea. The word hung and shivered. "I have orders," Jaime said finally, quietly, "to bring you to the Red Keep, to take that man's head if he resists." "You won't," Bronn said. He meant it. He did not say it as a dare. He said it like a truth the world already knew and was waiting for Jaime to acknowledge. The one-handed knight's mouth tightened. "Why not?" "Because you're tired of being someone else's blade," Bronn said. "Because you are better with one hand than most men are with two. Because you don't love the queen who gave those orders as you once did. Because I'm the only bastard sword between your niece and a dozen hands with plans." "That is a pretty speech," Jaime said. "Not pretty," Bronn said. "True." Jaime turned then, just his head, seeking counsel with a glance like some men seek it with entire small councils. He saw a white cloak's blank hands, a red cloak's shifting feet, a Sellsword's humor. He looked back. "What did you do?" he asked Myrcella. She lifted her chin. "I made a vow," she said. "I was not tricked. I wanted a vow that was mine." Jaime closed his eyes. A brief thing, a man letting winter in and closing the shutters quickly. When he opened them again, he said, "To him." "Yes," she said, "to him." He could have argued law and succession and prudence, and he could have argued 1,000 right things that had served him poorly. He did not. He looked like a man remembering a boy, and then he nodded once. "I can't protect you from her," he said as quietly as if he were telling her a story. "Not entirely." "I know," Myrcella said. "It isn't your fault." "No," he said. He breathed out. "I will escort you to the city. You will not be separated. If any man attempts to touch your husband, I will cut his hand off myself." "Always the hands with you," Bronn said cheerfully, because no one else was going to be cheerful here. He did not miss the flicker that ran through Jaime's jaw. It was cruel to jab a man there. Bronn was not cruel by accident. He did it on purpose or not at all. This time he did not do it again. They entered the city to a sound that had nothing to do with cheers. Sound in King's Landing is a stew. Metal clatter, seagull cry, the mutter of 1,000 mild hatreds. Somewhere a woman screamed because someone had taken her orange. Somewhere a man laughed because he had cheated his friend. The gates swallowed them and spat them into a street too narrow for pride. Myrcella's cloak with the star on it drew dark eyes. Bronn kept his head turned slightly to take in the windows above, the roofs, the mouths of alleys like wounds. They crossed the fish market and the mud gate and the square where once he had stood and watched wildfire turn a river into a story told at night. The Red Keep rose. It always looks like more than one castle, as if it had grown and been hacked back and grown again. It looks like someone built a stronghold inside a stronghold and then nailed a third stronghold around that for luck. Bronn liked it more now. It was going to be angrier today than most days. He liked that too. Angry men tell you things smart men keep to themselves. Cersei Lannister waited in the hall where courtiers learned to move like silk when all they wanted to do was run. She had a goblet she did not drink from. She had a dress cut to make flower of lesser women. She had a face carved into something that had once been pretty and was now something else. Grief had given her a knife and she kept stabbing with it even when no one was in front of her. "You," she said, and did not finish any sentence because there were many possible endings and none good. "Me," Bronn agreed. The High Septon did not attend. He sent a message instead, stern and clean and full of God. "The faith takes no part in a union made in secrecy," he wrote, the starry words pricking the eye. "The faith cannot bless what was done without its light," he wrote. "The faith holds that vows matter regardless of who watched." It was all very useful to save and throw at someone else later. Bronn tucked those words between others like a knife inside a boot. "Annul it," Cersei commanded. "You will go to the Starry September and tear your name out of their book. You," she pointed at Myrcella. She did not look at her. "You will go to your room. You will not speak without being spoken to." "No," Myrcella said. It was soft. It was polite. It was a hammer. "What did you say?" Cersei asked, and there was something wild in the room suddenly, a thing like a mare that smells wolf. "I said no," Myrcella said again. "I am your daughter. I love you," and her voice broke in the exact place where her walking had not, because walking is easier than loving sometimes. "But I said vows beneath the 7. You told me the 7 matter." "They matter when they are used rightly," Cersei said. "He is a Sel's word." "I am," Bronn said helpfully. She looked at him then, properly. She smiled the way an adder might smile if one taught it to. "I should have let you be cut to pieces in the Vale." "You tried to have me killed later," Bronn said. "You're still welcome to try. It's nice to have a hobby." "You think you've won something," she said, lovely and deadly. "You will be dragged through the streets and then—" Jaime's voice sliced across her words.
No.
It was not loud. It did not need to be. It had iron in it. That new iron some men grow when they have lost things they thought were iron. Cersei turned that adder smile on him.
No.
"No," he said. "There has been enough dragging through streets." "You forget yourself," she said. "I remember myself all too well," he said. It would have been useful for Bronn to be afraid then, to make faces and whisper and plead. It would have been useful to be brave, to put his hand to the knife. He did neither. He watched everyone else feel the floor turn under their feet. What men do when the floor turns tells you everything. The Tyrells sent their thinnest envoy with the most flowers on his cloak. He spoke beautifully about how marriages were houses and houses should be built by men who know how to build rather than by anyone who finds stones in a field. Bronn gave him back the queen's letter from the road, unopened. "Your lady will like that better than any words I have," he said. The envoy blinked, surprised out of his performance, and Bronn liked him more for it. Prince Doran did not come. He sent ink. His words moved like old water. He regretted the injury to his prince's heart. He regretted the injury to his brother's plans. He regretted the injury to truth. He accepted that a vow had been spoken. He would sit and think more. That last sentence was more dangerous than any threat. Men who promise to sit and think before they cut you tend to work out where to put the blade to cut deepest. The High Sparrow's men came with their feet bare and their eyes hot. Bronn did not let them past his door. "This is my wife's chamber," he said to a man with a beard like a brush. "Take off your shoes if you like, but don't put your eyes where they're not wanted." "The seven see all," the man said. "They see me not letting you in," Bronn said. "I suppose they'll make up their minds." He slept across Myrcella's threshold on the second night, blade out. On the third night, a girl came up the back stairs with cakes and a map under them. Bronn ate the cakes and liked the map better. House Stokeworth was marked with a heavy hand. Cersei moved her green pins and sent her kettle black north to fetch him, to squeeze him, to unmake a knot. The map's little black X was the place Cersei had told a Sellsword with a clean face to find Bronn's throat. The girl with the tray had kind eyes, and he did not ask them where they had learned to look kindly. He tipped her enough to make kindness taste like something she might want to try again. He did not go north. He stayed in the city where all the knives were visible. He played tiles in a noisy wine shop and won just enough to be liked and lost just enough to make men relax. He watched the Kettleblacks out of the corners of their own eyes and saw the place where each one would fail. He imagined telling the High Septon that if the gods wanted him dead, the gods could come do it themselves. He imagined the gods shrugging because gods in cities shrug more than gods in country. He thought of Lollys Stokeworth once and wondered whether, in all this, she were happier without him. Myrcella learned the palace the way a clever child learns a language. It didn't love her, but it spoke to her if she was patient. She learned which girl would bring her honest gossip and which girl would bring gossip wrapped in poison. She learned which guard would look away when Bronn went where he was not asked to go. She learned that her mother was a storm of knives that cut indiscriminately. "Do you regret me?" she asked Bronn on a night when the city screamed because someone had dropped a lamp and Elaine had caught. "Yes," he said easily. "I regret everything that makes other people strong. You make them strong. But I like you anyway. It's very inconvenient." "You regret not marrying the Lady Lollys," she said, more statement than question. "I regret that you can't buy sausages in this city past twilight," he said. "And I regret the lady sometimes when I want quiet and a roof with no arrows pointing at it. But I would have been bored." "Are you bored?" "No," she considered. "I am afraid sometimes." "Good. That means you're paying attention." "And you? Are you afraid?" she asked. "Always," he said. He folded his hands behind his head and stared at the beams. "That's why I'm still alive." Cersei set a trap the way she set jewels upon her breast. With too steady a hand, too certain it would be admired. A proclamation appeared like a new shrine in the square the faith liked now that its feet were bare. The Queen Regent, out of devotion to her son and to decency, sought to purge the court of ill-joined things. False vows, tainted unions, corrupted loyalties. There would be no trials by combat. That had been a little jest that grew teeth. There would be a hearing instead in the sept, a public washing of hands, a public tearing of pages. Names were named. They were Bronn's names. Bringing Tom and Tuller to the sept would be like bringing sausages to a pit of lean dogs. He left them with Myrcella and took only a toothpick in his mouth and a knife in his boot. He walked to the sept and let the city see him walk. Jaime fell into step beside him at the corner where the cobbles slip under the heel because too many men have bled there over the years and the lime never holds. "You could run," Jaime said without judgment. "I could," Bronn said. "You won't."
Non.
They did not speak again until the steps of the sept where people had spilled their new piety like molasses, sticky and catching shoes. The High Septon stood like a shepherd who had discovered his flock contained wolves and decided to love the wolves harder. His eyes were gentle. His voice was not. He spoke about vows and about the first marriage of men being to truth. He spoke about betrothals made in haste and solemnized by fear. He spoke about 1,000 things that were not Bronn and Myrcella while pretending to speak only about them. It was artful. It was dangerous. "My vows were to keep her safe," Bronn said when he was permitted a mouth. "I did."
Ido.
The High Septon looked at him as if into a well that might be full of frogs. "And if the king commands otherwise?" "I'm not married to the king," Bronn said. Cersei whispered. The sept took the whisper into its mouth and flung it back. The whisper became a mutter. Bastard, usurper of the bed, sellsword filth, protector, perhaps, in some mouths that had children and scarred ears. Words clashed in the air. Bronn could almost see them cut one another into letters and drift down like dust. The High Septon lifted his hand and men in rough spun pressed closer. Then the doors blew open, not theatrically. They simply wrenched on their hinges because that many bodies coming in must move something. The first bodies were not many. They were two. One was a boy with a long face and careful eyes like raisins. The other was a man with a white streak in his beard, a halberd like the answer to a question few dared ask, and the quiet of a mountain. Ariohoda stopped 3 paces inside and made the place his. "Prince Doran's messages are late," he said, and everyone in the sept turned because the mountain had spoken. "So I have come myself by the fastest road men can find when they have need." Cersei's mouth puckered like something drying. "You are not welcome here. Few men in history have found themselves welcome when they arrive to stop a foolishness," Areo said without malice. He bowed a little. "My prince hears many things. He hears that a girl of his guest right was brought to the city and would be made an example. He hears that vows will be cancelled by men who were not present when they were spoken. He hears that the city remembers riot too well and would like new riot. He told me to say this: Dorne does not approve of the manner of this marriage. Dorne wonders at its prudence. Dorne would have chosen another. Dorne accepts that vows spoken before the 7 bind the speakers." Tristane's hands shook against the sleeves of his cloak, and he did not hide it. He lifted his chin like he had been taught and let the shaking be seen. "And Dorne will take my cousin back to peace if she wishes it," he said to Myrcella, and Bronn liked that. The boy had found a way to put her first in a room that wished to put other things first. Myrcella saw. "I am not peace yet," she said. "I need to be a wall for a while longer. A wall must be strengthened," the High Septon said, seizing the word. "A wall must be set upon stone." "Then set me," Myrcella said simply. "Set me somewhere you can defend." "That is your task, isn't it, father?" He blinked. Bronn almost admired her then. She had called him father. Old clever beggars can be cut with the simplest knives. The High Septon bowed his head. He did not annul them. He did not bless them. He pronouncing nothing beyond that the gods will not be mocked, that vows are not wine to be drunk and pissed out. It was enough. Later, after the room had emptied and words had finished blunting their edges on one another for the day, Bronn stood on a parapet and watched evening pour like cold soup into the alleys. He'd won something. He was not sure what shape it was. He half expected an arrow from a friend. Jaime leaned beside him and said, "If any man had told me I'd live to see the day Ariohoda saved a sellsword's neck." "A lot of men have told you many things," Bronn said. "You should listen to fewer of them. What will you do now?" Jaime asked. "Find a roof," Bronn said. "A real one, not a title Cersei can pinch. Somewhere stones are thicker than opinions." "You could take Stokeworth," Jaime said idly. "Do it properly this time. Make your own claim by something other than a queen's whim. Marry the place to your wife instead of the other way. Let little lords in the crownlands be more frightened of your dogs than of mother's tongue." "Stokeworth," Bronn said, as if he were tasting a wine he had not ordered. "Sausages again. You and your sausages. I've seen wars lost because the men hadn't had a decent sausage in a month, Bronn said. Makes them rash. Everything makes men rash, Jaime said. Love, hate, hands, Bronn said softly. Jaime's mouth twisted. Hands. Myrcella did not belong to the city. She belonged to a line of stones that stretched over it and then beyond it. She sat in a window and watched the river burp oil and dead cats and felt sorry for the river. She thought of her scar. She touched it at night. She wondered whether men would use it as a word in their mouths, and decided not to care. She spoke to her mother in rooms where soft things had hard edges. Sometimes her mother wept. Sometimes her mother raged. Sometimes her mother became a girl and wanted to braid her daughter's hair like a game the way she never had time to when she was queen of other things. Myrcella, Cersei said once, and the way she said it was a prayer which had never happened before. You choose these cruelties. I choose myself, Myrcella said, and it was not cruel. Felt like hunger. Cersei sent men north in pairs to Stokeworth and Rosby and the places that thought themselves too small to be eaten. She sent words to the lords who had turned their ears away from her once and dared them to turn again. The Tyrells sent bread and fruit and clever women. The High Sparrow sent sermons that tasted of iron. Dorne sent nothing for a long while and then sent a basket of blood oranges cut into quarters and packed around a sealed letter, and everyone in the hall watched Bronn open it because manners wore thin when blood is involved. Prince Doran's hand rode steady across the page. The gist was this. The pale man Gerald Dane had been chased into rocks that liked to break men's ankles. If he lived changed. Arianne had been chastised as one chastises a young lioness one would prefer not to cage forever. His son would not weep again for a year. Doran agreed that certain men at certain times do bold foolish things to save young lives. He would remember this. He expected Bronn to remember it too. Bronn folded the letter. I prefer oranges to letters, he said. You prefer anything to letters, Myrcella said. That's true. He handed her an orange slice. The juice ran down her wrist like gold. He took Stokeworth not by bloodshed but by dinners. He arrived with sacks that clinked and a cook. He put good meat on spits and made the place smell better than it had in years. Men are simple. They will sell their souls for 2 sausages if they believe the meat will keep coming. The O.L.D. lady who pinched died of some small failing of the blood nobody could name. Bronn did not kill her. He would have had it been useful. It wasn't. The sister who thought herself a cat turned out to be a mouse. He kept her alive because he was fond of mice. The queen's men arrived to demand oaths and were given stew and a bench by the fire and found their demands melted by heat until all that was left were eyes watching and ears writing down the smell of spice. He set dogs at the lanes and men on the towers. He put coin where men could see it and coin where they could not. He hired a maester who didn't mind that his chain had a link from a kitchen. He made a chair at the high table that was hers, and when she sat in it, he made sure men saw him not sit until she had, and he made sure the boy who'd come to be a hostage and stayed to be something else had wine but never too much and books but never the wrong ones. He brought Myrcella to Stokeworth by back roads and with no banners. The day had that prettiness late summer borrows from early autumn, a clarity that makes edges merciless. She dismounted and stood, breathing as if she had come up from a deep pool. Crows muttered in the orchard. A pig rooted with blunt enthusiasm near a fence and snorted when a boy cuffed it. The boy looked mortified to be seen and then proud, in quick alternation. The castle was not beautiful. It was honest. Its walls had settled like a woman's hips and would not be coaxed higher. She loved it instantly because it did not try to be more than it was. Is it mine? She asked. And Bronn thought of words and roofs and the places where 2 things overlap and become a third thing. Enough to matter, he said. They held court in a hall that smelled of smoke and stew and reeds. A woman in a ragged cap brought a boy with a broken arm and a story about a neighbor's mule. Bronn gave her coin and the neighbor a warning he would regret if he ignored. A tanner complained about a priest. A priest complained about the tanner. A man with a torch came to mutter about how the queen would hang them all, and Bronn smiled and said he would not let her, as if that were a simple promise a man could make in a world like this. At night, they played Sivas with pieces. Bronn did not pretend to understand, and Myrcella beat him by thinking 3 moves ahead because she was not playing the game he was. He had always liked women who made him put his boots on faster. Tyrion Lannister heard of it in a tavern whose floor had not been scrubbed since King Aerys was a boy. He laughed so hard he choked and then drank until his eyes watered. "Bronn," he said to no one, to a barmaid whose chin made men excel in generosity, to a shadow that would later say it had been Varys's. "You son of a sow, you did the one thing that makes the whole barrel tip. You put wit at a table that never expected it." Across the sea, Daenerys Targaryen learned the name Myrcella from a ship's captain who needed coin and respect. She rolled it in her mouth and tasted Lannister. She did not know whether to spit. In her tent, a boy with a trident on his cloak whispered to a man with eyes like old pennies about how a girl named Myrcella might be useful, and the man with the penny eyes shook his head because he knew something about girls and usefulness that the boy did not. He had loved one once who had died of usefulness. Snow began to talk in the north. It has a voice when it means to. Bronn didn't care. He cared about barley and blades and whether the dogs bred too big or too small. He cared about whether the men under him laughed in their cups around women and whether that laughter turned to something else. He cared about which little eyes lowered when Myrcella entered the hall and which little eyes rose. He cared that once, a boy with straw in his hair called his lady wife Queen without meaning, and the word fell and made a sound like a small stone hitting a deeper pool, and he pretended not to hear it and then went to the rampart and stood and thought about how words throw off rings long after the stones sink. Jaime came sometimes. He brought no banners, only bread and honest company. They walked the village street past pigs and men who were pigs when they thought no one watched. They spoke in lines with long spaces between. "She looks older," Jaime said once, and Bronn said, "That's because she sees more." "Cersei will never forgive you," Jaime said another time. "I would be disappointed if she did," Bronn said. "I like my enemies practiced." "Enemies?" Jaime said softly, as if tasting the syllables in case they were poison. "I never thought I'd wear that word about my sister." "You wore a lot of things about your sister," Bronn said, and Jaime's mouth made a shape like a man who had been struck and liked that someone had finally dared to do it. They drank and spoke of hands, of loss and gain, of how a single oath could make a man and unmake him, and how sometimes one must swear an oath to unmake an older one so that the map of your soul has roads you can still travel. Myrcella's scar paled. People forgot to see it. She did not forget to touch it. She learned that the way she spoke in a room could make someone fall in love with her far more surely than hair or face. She learned that a woman who comes with no army can build 1 out of 10 kitchen boys, 2 proper knights, a septon with a limp and a voice like a hand on your head, and a man like Bronn. She learned to say no with nice words. She learned to say yes with harder ones. She learned that if she wrote her name on parchment, she should make the letters sharp, because soft letters do nothing in rooms where hard men stand. When the raven came with a wax seal broken by haste, the maester looked scared. Ravens always make what is ordinary feel like prophecy. The message had crossed a country of gossip to bring them something cleaner. Black banners again, of a sort. A boy king too soft to sharpen his own knives. Dee agreed to the faith's demands, and the queen, who had thought herself unassailable, had been made to walk. The city had laughed and thrown rotten fruit and prayed and gone back to work. The faith had found itself stronger than it had expected, and now peered at every bedchamber and found sin in every bed, and every bed empty of sin, suspect for emptiness. "They will come again," Myrcella said, "to us, with their bare feet and their books." "Let them," Bronn said. "I have boots." He had more than boots. He had men who owed him supper and safety and a place to sleep, and the knowledge that he would not lay them down under some grand lord's plow as if they were furrows. He had a wife who could stand and say nothing and make it sound like a sentence. He had a letter from Doran with a line in it he read more than he needed to. "We will not love you, but we will not forget." Sometimes at night, he wondered if he missed the easy days when a man could be told whom to kill and do it and then count his coin. These were not easy days. These were days where sausages mattered because you needed men fed and quiet, and where your wife came to you with news about the price of barley because barley was now a word like sword. He smiled in the dark and pressed his hand to the stone beneath his pallet and listened to the weight of the roof. Do you ever think of the Lady Lollys? Myrcella asked him once when thunder crawled over the fields and rain flattened the barley into a silky sea. Yes, he said. Sometimes I think she would have snored. Sometimes I think she would have been kinder than most of the people in this castle. I can be kind, Myrcella said as if bargaining. You are kind, he said. It's very annoying. She laughed in the dark. He heard the lightning before he saw it. It sounded like a castle making its mind up. Men came anyway because men always do. They came with orders signed by quills that had never touched a pig. They came with piety that squeaked when it walked. They came with swords that had done no honest work. Bronn met them in the yard and gave them beer and let them sweat and let them feel the weight of the walls and the way dogs look at strangers when they have been taught the smell of the hand that feeds them. He made them say everything out loud. He made them hear themselves. He watched their faces when Myrcella came down the stairs in a dress the color of old cream and bore herself like the thing she had named herself. I am wed, she said. My vows are mine. She looked at their feet. Some of them had boots. Some did not. You can call me princess if it makes you feel right inside. You can call me lady if it helps you remember which laws are yours and which laws aren't. You will not call me girl. They didn't call her girl. Years in Westeros crawl like cats under chairs and then leap. The leap came on a day when the wind smelt of bad fish and better rain, and a messenger with salt on his boots said a boy with a dragon on his banner had landed and was telling people who to be. He had gold in his name and hunger in his face. Varys had put him there like a piece on a board he knew better than anyone else alive, and Tyrion, if he was anywhere at all, was either drinking or laughing or both. Everyone comes back, Myrcella said. Everything returns. Not hands, Jaime said when he heard, and his smile was like something that had learned to live cut in half. Doran sat in Sunspear and sent no letter, and then sent one so heavy the raven staggered, and in it was a sentence like a blade laid carefully upon a table between friends. Dorne will back no girl against her brother unless she makes herself more than a name. These are days when a name is not enough. Come and make a bargain or wait and be bargained. Do you trust him? Bronn asked. No, Myrcella said, but I trust what he wants. He wants Dorne alive and his son not to be made a fool. He wants hatred to cool. He wants his house to sit on every chair when men count chairs they may sit upon. I trust those wants. They don't change. Then we go, Bronn said. They did. The road south had learned his feet and his feet the road. Hoda met them not at the gate but under a fig tree. He looked at Bronn and did not smile. Men like Hoda smile in some other room that is always locked. He asked Bronn how the barley grew. He asked Myrcella whether her scar hurt in storms. He asked Tom how many men he could put a feather through at 100 paces. He did not ask about vows, blessings, annulling. He led them to Doran, who sat swaddled in patience and salt and watched Myrcella walk. He did not pinch. He never had. I will not have you for my enemy, Doran said before greetings could settle. I will not have you for my ally until I must. You mustn't anything, Myrcella said with a courtesy that stung. So I will make you want to. How? Doran asked almost kindly. By making it impossible not to, she said. By having something you need. You are tired of being underestimated because you are slow. I am tired of being underestimated because I am a girl. Let us bore men into underestimating us together. Then, while they are bored, we will move. If it was flippant, it was also something else. Doran's eyes widened. Half an inch no more. He loved a plan that was boredom until it wasn't. We will speak, he said. They spoke. In that room, little men with ink would later declare a treaty had been fashioned that made nonsense of marriage and sense of war. In that room, a man whose sword had bought him a castle and a girl whose castle had needed a sword tied knots and ribbons again. They made a pact thin enough to pull through a ring and thick enough to hold. Dorne would not break her against Tommen and his faith and his flowers. Dorne would not hand her over. Dorne would write letters and mean some of them and not others. Dorne would insist that the union remained unconsummated and would stand a guard at the door with a face like a mountain to ensure it. Dorne would acknowledge her style in letters sent privately to men who count styles. Dorne would deny it publicly while someone else shouted about dragons. Dorne would wait, and waiting is the most terrible action in wars where men like to move. Bronn stood by a window looking out at water that laughed at borders and thought, not for the first time, that in a universe where men dream of crowns and wake with knives, he had stumbled on the only thing that made sense. A roof is better than a crown. A name written the right way at the right time is sharper than a sword. A promise is a kind of blade if one knows how to use it. He thought of a little boy in a hood and a long man with no right hand and a queen who was made of stone and tried to turn other people to stone when she touched them. He thought of Myrcella who had been a flag and decided she preferred to be a wall. He thought of sausages and barley and dogs. He thought of the moment under a cliffside shrine when he had said yes simply because no was not clever enough. On a night when the sea lay still like a big sleeping thing and the stars decided to be honest for once and not hide, Myrcella climbed to the parapet and stood with her hair wrapped up tight. The wind plucked at the tendrils and failed. She looked at the black ribbon of water and said, soft, as if to the gulls perched looking stupid and wise, "Will this be enough?" "For what?" Bronn asked because he did not like to answer questions that weren't asked. "For changing my name," she said. "It already did," he said. She smiled without turning, and the scar drew the way a seam draws when a dressmaker is not perfect and then teaches herself to be. "Will it be enough to save other girls who do not have roofs to name for themselves?" "No," Bronn said honestly, "but it's a good start." "Good starts," she said, as if the words were the least and the most one could hope for. Lightning far out at sea blinked like a dragon's eye deciding whether to open. He watched it and did not feel small. He felt precisely sized to his work. He had been a cat in the seam between fame and forgetfulness and had learned to love it. Now he was a hinge, and hinges creak less when they are well-oiled. He would oil this one with sausages and laws and patience. He would oil it with the weight of his body across a threshold and with the exact right time to smile at a queen and the exact right time to cut a man across the thigh so he fell where he could do little harm. He would oil it with the way he took a vow and wore it because it was useful and then discovered it was something else besides. In the end, men will write that a girl wed unwisely and a man took a life he had not been bred for and the world groaned and then shrugged. Men will make it clever in poems. Men will get it wrong. In the long quiet between trumpets and funerals, in the rooms where barley is counted and boys learn to tie their shoes and a stag's rack dries above a hearth, the truth will set its teeth. This was that kind of truth. Not grand, not bright. A roof, a name, a knife pressed flat against the world until the world forgot it was a knife. Bronn smiled into the wind and did not let it push him. In the morning he would tell Tom to check the east wall mortar because it was crumbling near the corner by the pig pens, and he would tell Tuller to stop giving the dogs bones with splinters, and he would tell Myrcella that the baker's boy needed new boots and he would make sure she was the one to hand them to him in the hall, and he would write a letter to Doran that said nothing and meant all sorts of things, and he would send sausages to Old Town with a note for a septon that said "Keep your book open, father." A bird with golden feathers slept behind him in a room with shutters he had chosen and a chair that had been put there because it made her look her size when she sat in it. He had saved her from one storm and brought her to another, calmer, wider, a storm of counting, of waiting. Suited him, suited her. He had always been better with those storms. The sea heaved once like a sigh and lay still again. In the city far to the north, a queen stood before a mirror and pretended she did not see a girl's eyes in her own face. In the mountains, men taught their sons to tie knots and bows. In the east, a boy with gold in his name learned how to when to say please or else. Bronn stretched, bones unpopping as if they had learned to be quiet. He touched the parapet he had paid for and the air he had not and went down into the castle that did not know the word destiny. It knew supper. It knew the weight of feet. It knew, at last, the exact set of a hinge. In the morning, he told Tom to check the east wall mortar because it was crumbling near the corner by the pig pens, and Tom returned with lime on his lashes and a grin that said he'd found the soft seam before any man with a ladder did. Tuller stopped giving the dogs bones with splinters, cursing Bronn for making him boil the bones until they turned to jelly, and then bragging later that his broth had made a bitch whelp 12 live pups. The baker's boy got his new boots in the hall at dusk instead of at the kitchen door. Myrcella put them into his hands herself, and the boy tried to kneel and instead toppled, and the whole room laughed because laughter made the roof feel lower in a good way. The maester, thin, hair like old hay, chain with a kitchen link that rattled louder than the rest, brought a ledger so fat it made Bronn rub his temples. "Barley," he said, like a man invoking a saint, "and oats. And the stores from Hayford are short because they kept back a third. Everyone keeps back a third because they believe everyone else will take a third. Mathematics is a defense." "Dogs don't count like that," Bronn said. "Send word to Hayford that if they keep back a third again, I'll keep back their steward's right hand and their reeve's left. Ash. And make good mathematics." The maester winced as if his chain had pinched his skin. "You cannot." "I can say it," Bronn said. "Saying costs nothing. Doing is dear. I'll decide later whether I mean to be so dear." Myrcella watched with a quill between her fingers and a little ink on the same scar she often touched when thinking. "If we take less from Hayford than the city asks," she said, "we can take more from Rosby. Rosby always boasts of its heavy wagons." "Rosby boasts of phlegm," Bronn said, "and of having a cough longer than any decent man lives. But you're right, Rosby can spare more. We'll have them spare it to us rather than to anyone who wants to make himself loved in King's Landing by giving away other men's grain." "What will you do when they come with orders sealed with wax shaped like lions?" the maester asked in that mild way that always meant he wanted to see if anyone else would say aloud what he only dared think. "I'll set them by the fire and watch whose face melts first," Bronn said. "Then I'll decide where to kneel and how low." "My lord is very droll," the maester said, and his mouth tried to smile and failed. He liked rules better than men who bent them and didn't break. When the first order came, it was square and heavy, and the wax lion bit as if it had teeth. It demanded tithes for the city and offered blessings from the Queen Mother and the Boy King and the gods and the debtors of the Iron Bank if necessary. Bronn read it standing and then turned it sideways and sniffed it and finally used it under a short leg of a table so the tabletop stopped rocking when he put his cup down. He sent back 6 wagons of barley anyway because he had no desire to watch King's Landing gnaw itself bloody. He just didn't say yes when he could say maybe and look obliging doing it. They came with swords the next week. 3 Lannister men and 2 Kettleblacks whose jaws shone with oil and pride. The Kettleblacks walked like men who had done violence with someone else watching for coin. Bronn liked them less than he liked most weeds. He met them in the yard while boys with buckets watched covertly from behind the hoghouse. "Happy to see you," Bronn said. "You're uglier than I remember." One Kettleblack flashed his teeth. "Mother says I'm her prettiest." "She'd be right," Bronn said. "She hasn't seen the rest of your line." He didn't look at the Lannisters. He looked at the horse of the one to his left. Fat behind the knee, good for a short run and a fall. "You here for the wagons?" "We're here for the wagons, your head, and the girl if she's softened," the other Kettleblack said too brightly. Bronn tilted his head. "You shouldn't say everything you're thinking. People start to listen." He looked past them. "Tom." Tom's arrow cracked the buckle of the right-hand Kettleblack's gorget as if it had been tuned for that note all along. The man clutched his throat, shock fetching him before pain did. The other Kettleblack screamed something about honor and leapt off his horse with a flourish that would have made a tavern squeal. He made 2 pretty strokes at air and 1 pretty stroke at Bronn's shoulder. Bronn stepped inside the pretty stroke and tapped the man's temple with the pommel. He went down like a sack of flour tipped too quickly. The Lannister men did not move. They had faces that had known instruction committees. Bronn smiled at them until they smiled back out of fear and discomfort, and then he gave them ale and bread and sent them home with 6 additional wagons and a coral shaft wrapped in cloth. "Show the queen what happened to her compliments," he said. "Tell her there's more where that came from. Tell her she should send men who keep their mouths shut and their buckles tight." After the wagons left, Myrcella stood under the gate's shadow and breathed as if she had been under a lake. "You told Tom," she said. "I tell the wind when I want it to push a ship," Bronn said. "Tom doesn't miss when he cares to hit." "It could have gone wrong," she said. "It could always go wrong," he said, gentle. "That's why we get to be proud when it doesn't." In the days that followed, the yard learned the shape of practice. Myrcella rode at dawn in a plain wool cloak so dust would not be lively on her. Hair bound with plain leather. She learned to sit tall and turn quick and lean the right way when a horse thought it knew better than she did. She learned a crossbow that kicked like a mule and a small knife that didn't. She learned to raise a hand and have men stop because they recognized that hand. When she needed words for the faith, the limping septon gave them to her without scolding. "This passage," he said, one finger on the seven-pointed star, "will be thrown at you. It speaks of obedience. Remember the next line. It speaks of vows. Men prefer the first. The gods wrote the second on purpose. And if they insist the gods wrote the first for me and the second for them?" she asked. "Speak the first yourself," the septon said, eyes kind and wry. "Then be true to the second. The gods are not as simple as men pretend. They made hunger to keep us honest." The second trap came with a widow's wail. A cart overturned in the lane by the mill at dusk when the gate never quite settled right on its hinges. Soldiers ran to help without orders because decent men do. The wail rose to a pitch that called people, and people came, and in the coming a gray-robed man set his foot upon the threshold with a knife that looked like a nail. Bronn was in the dark of the buttery when he heard the wail go wrong and the mill wheel thrum faster as if someone had leaned on it, and he walked out into the noise with his hands empty because empty hands look like surrender until they aren't. The gray-robed man did not see Myrcella's shadow behind him. She moved like a thought when she wanted to. She put the butt of the crossbow to the small of his back like a woman pressing a man to a dance he would rather not take. He twitched. Bronn caught his wrist and twisted the knife away. "Where do you want it?" Bronn asked him. "Mercy," the man said, and his teeth were bad in a way that told more than his robe. He was thin with fanaticism and thinner with hunger. The faith had a way of picking men whose bellies made them righteous. "Tom," Bronn said without turning. "Walk up by the gatehouse and ask the city which of its saints told this man to put a nail in a girl's back." Loud. Tom went. The town bent an ear and liked what it heard. They like being on the side of fairness, peasant or lord, if the weather allows it. Bronn tied the gray-robed wrists and stood him upon a barrel inside the gate and spoke soft. "You put your foot in my yard when you had no right. Now I'll put my foot in your arse." He kicked the barrel out. The man hung 3 breaths before Tuller cut him down because Bronn did not like dead men near his gate unless he had asked their permission first. "Go back," Bronn told the faith men who had lingered outside the walls in case of a miracle. "Tell your shepherd his flock bites." The next letter came with roses pressed into it. It smelled of wit. Olenna Tyrell had a hand that wrote as if the quill were a thorn. She asked if Stokeworth remembered that its fields had been watered with reach gold more seasons than any man liked to confess. She complained that her grandson was too soft and her son too thick and her daughter-in-law too good at everything in company and nothing in bedchambers that mattered. She suggested that if Bronn meant to feed the city, he might prefer that House Tyrell be known as the hand that fed it rather than the lion's maw that took what it wanted. He sent back sausages and a single sentence. "If your cook shares her spice, I will remember your roses when the wind blows east." He'd barely sealed it when a new messenger arrived smelling of dust and blood and the thin terror of having outridden his own horse. He carried not a letter but a story. Pycelle dead in his own stink. Kevin Lannister killed by a child's hand. Candles guttering on cold red wax. A spider's steps between. Varys's whisper. An empty chair where a man who might have balanced a city had sat a day ago. Bronn took the news to Myrcella in the orchard where early apples made children's cheeks sticky. She bit a slice and closed her eyes a heartbeat before opening them and setting the slice down. "It was him," she said. "No name. Names gave men power and the spider made a home out of power." "Aye," Bronn said. "He said knots. Now he makes them otherwhere. What would he have of us?" she asked. "To be a knot he can pull when he wants a bell to ring," Bronn said. "We were before. He paid me to fetch you when Dornish nights ran too sweet. He'll be thinking I like coin better than law or love." "And do you?" she asked, and he looked at her because sometimes she put the knife edge in her voice in just the right place without even seeing it. "I like roofs," he said. "Coin buys roofs. Love knocks them down if you're not careful." Law pretends roofs don't leak. You and I will do what keeps the floor dry. Varys arrived anyway, of course, because men like him do not send letters when they enjoy seeing how rooms change their faces when they step into them. He came as a merchant wife's cousin who wore the wrong boots and knew the right doors. He sat by the kitchen fire and praised Tuller's sausages until Tuller blushed and then turned and found the corners where the shadows stuck most. "I was worried," he murmured to Bronn as if to a darling he'd neglected. "You've made a nest. Nests breed courage. Courage breeds stupidity. I keep my stupidity in jars for special days," Bronn said. "Why did you kill the only man who could keep Cersei from burning a city because someone looked at her wrong?" Varys' smile just touched his mouth like a cat's tail. "Because balance that depends on one man is not balance. Because I needed the city to remember me. Because I wanted to compel men like you to act because they are bored of other people's mistakes." "You could scold me plainly," Bronn said. Varys sipped broth, made a face, and then smiled at Tuller to mend the face. "A dragon lands," he said to the steam. "A prince unfurls a cloth soaked in old songs. The Tyrells are busied at Storm's End because they refuse to learn that waiting is sometimes victory. The Faith feels its toes dug into the city and thinks that means it owns the street when really it owns two corners and a hymn. The Iron Bank is counting. It always counts. It will pay whoever makes counting easier." "And you?" Bronn asked. "I send boys to sing in the right rooms and I pray," Varys said. "But I do not pray to the Seven. I pray to men who remember that the common folk need food before they need banners. If Stokeworth is feeding the city, Stokeworth can speak to the city. The spider web catches because it is sticky, not because it is strong. Be sticky." "Have you told the same to a boy who calls himself Aegon?" Bronn asked. "Has he sticky hands too?" Varys' eyes shone a moment with an animal's glint and went dim again. "He has tutors. He has a sword he knows how to hold for an hour in the morning. He has a notion that he should be loved. I prefer princes who want to be obeyed or contented. Love makes children. Obedience and contentment keep them fed." He set down his cup. "Make a bargain with Dorne that lets you keep your roof even if a dragon shadow passes over it. Feed the city and make it say your name sideways with a smile because its mouth is full. Keep your wife alive. Do not try to be clever more than you already are. Clever men in cities get turned into door lintels when storms arrive." "You should write a book," Bronn said. "I do," Varys said. "But my pages are men." He was gone by the time the bread came out of the oven. He always left like that before smells turned men honest. Word from Dorne arrived with a slice clean. As a knife, Aegon's banners had pricked the Stormlands like plenty of mosquitoes. A castle had turned its cloak, and then its coat, and then its mind. Jon Connington's name folded through reports like a stain that would not wash. Arianne was restless again and had been set to writing instead of riding. Trystane read each Raven message twice, and the third time stared at his hands. Doran offered a thought that was as much warning as friendship. When boys with old songs step where they were not born to step, stones wobble. Do not be the stone under a first footfall if you can help it. Doran's a poet today, Bronn said, tipping wine to his tongue. He's tired of cleaning blood the rest of us spill, Myrcella said, fingers on the map. If Aegon takes the city, what happens to the faith? They grow another face and keep singing, Bronn said. Faith is good at that. Men who feed the faith will be permitted to pretend their old sins were virtues. Men who starved it will be called names. And us? She asked. We call ourselves names before anyone else does, Bronn said. Then we feed the right mouths and lock the right doors and wait. They sent go-betweens to Rosby who coughed until his nose bled and then declared he was tired of kings and would do business with food and law and not with lions and flowers. He signed a parchment with a hand that shook but wrote straight. Rosby would send half its wagons first to Stokeworth for distribution to wards named thereafter by Myrcella, Lady of Stokeworth by right of marriage. He wrote the words and Bronn liked the angle at which he wrote Myrcella's name. It looked like he wanted to get it right. A courier with a fish pin arrived from the Riverlands and said in a breath that smelled of eel that Lord Edmure was a ghost with a bride and no fortress. That Blackfish swam in a castle moat that had no water. that Jaime Lannister had gone to talk men off a wall and then not returned. That the Freys were counting sausages they'd never paid for. Bronn sent him home with sausages anyway and told him to tell his friends that Stokeworth fed men who told the truth even when the truth was a poor dish. The High Sparrow sent a man with clean nails and dirty eyes. He looked at the yard and at the girls who swept it and at the little shrine by the stable door where men touched foreheads out of habit more than hope. He praised the sop kitchen in the village that Myrcella had ordered opened on the sly and pretended to regret he had not thought of it first, and then asked softly whether a vow made in fear could be honored as if made in delight. "A vow isn't a melon," Myrcella said. "It doesn't ripen more sweet because the sun pleases it. The 7 would not bind a child's promise to a grown woman's fate," the man said. "The 7 bound a man to starve for 40 days and call it good," Myrcella said. "They cannot be accused of being afraid of binding." She smiled. She had learned when to smile. "We will feed your poor as if they were ours. You will stop sending men with nails in their sleeves. And we will send 2 wagons a week to your altar in the city with barley and oil. You will bless those wagons. You will not ask who wrote the names on the parchments that go with them." "My lady is shrewd," the man said. "My lady is tired," she answered. "And when I am tired, I grow practical." That became the rhythm. Wagons clattered out and clattered in. The yard smelled of rye and horse and often a faint sweetness when the brewer boiled wort. The maester's ledger grew another belly. Little laws grew like mushrooms in damp corners. Who got a turn at the handmill, who had to stand guard on the 3rd night of the moon. How many prayers the septon said over a dead man if the man had been kind and how many if he had been less. They wrote them down, because written words are little stones in the road that keep feet from sinking in mud. The letter from the west came sealed in cracked wax stamped with a kraken that looked as if it wanted to crawl off the page and pinch someone. It spoke of smoke over the Shield Isles and of a man with 1 eye who had horns in his head and none in his hands. It spoke of ravens gone dumb, and Bronn tossed it into the hearth because there was nothing in it that would stop a pig from rooting or a hungry man from turning into a thief at dusk. "We watch our coast," he told Tom. "If a ship appears with eyes painted on its prow, we light the beacons and let the neighbors pretend we are brave for their sake." The attempt that nearly took everything came on a clear afternoon when clearness makes people careless. It began when the butcher's boy ran into the hall with a hair in his nose that pointed like a needle and shouted, "Fire!" and then stood as if he had swallowed the word and it had burnt him. Smoke sidled along the stable roof where hay had dried beautifully for weeks. Men ran with buckets and the pump clacked and the dogs yelped because they liked to pretend to be useful. Tuller cursed the man who had left a lantern near straw, then cursed more when he realized no one had. Bronn was halfway across the yard before his smile dropped from his face. The stable fire dragged eyes. The other side of the yard held a cart half full of sacks and 3 men who looked like drovers and moved like knives wrapped in wool. One had that odd lightness a cat has just before it leaps. The other had a scar that went up his nose and into his hairline like a thread pulled too hard. The third had a sack that was too light to be grain, and he held it too carefully for a man paid to hold things. "Tom," Bronn said. He didn't need to say it twice. Tom's first arrow went into the sack. It made no sound a sack should make. It made the sound of a pot turned on its side. 10 rats burst from the hole. Not rats, children. Small and fast and trained to be brittle and useful. They were points in a line. The first went for the steps that led to the solar where Myrcella Samedi. MES wrote in the afternoon because she liked the light there. The second and the third went toward the back stairs by the buttery. The fourth had a knife between teeth. "Little birds," Bronn said without any humor, and then he moved. He cut the man with the lightness first because light men move fastest and kill first if you let them. He cut him along the ribs so the man thought about breath instead of killing. He lunged at the scar up the nose second and drove him back into a water, but so that when the man drew in breath it was water and panic, not air and joy. Tom took the third like a man swatting a fly. Tuller grabbed 2 of the children, not roughly, and simply lifted them into the air by their scruffs and held them as if they were squawking chickens. 2 got past. Bronn didn't like that. He followed the shadow of their speed to the stairs where the air held a knitted stillness he'd learned to trust his life to. The first boy came out of the stair mouth with his throat low and his knife more needle than blade. He moved like a whisper through a curtain. Bronn missed him on purpose first, let him think he had space, then turned the boy's wrist and pushed him under the low beam above the stair so he cracked his head and the knife came free as if it had grown tired of being held. The second boy was older or had learned faster or had been loved sometime and forgotten it later. He came with the knife hidden and the grin out. He went for the door, not the man. This one Bronn had to tackle. It was not pretty. They hit the door together and rolled and the boy spat in Bronn's eye and wriggled like a ferret. Bronn caught his ankle. The boy twisted. The knife flashed, stars underwater. Myrcella's voice from inside the solar said, "Stop." The boy did, because voices do that sometimes, especially when they come from where you expect something softer and it turns out to be a wall. She stood with her hand on the table and the quill still between her fingers, as if she'd only risen to stretch. She had a smear of ink on her knuckle and a line between her brows. "Come in," she told the boy calmly. "If you mean to kill me, you won't do it in a hall. You'll do it in a room with a chair." The boy blinked hard because something in him remembered being spoken to politely. Bronn didn't loosen his grip on the ankle. He held it the way a man holds a rope when he's not sure whether the other end is tied properly. The boy took 2 steps inside the solar and then 2 steps more until he could have touched her. He didn't. His hand trembled. He let the knife tilt and fall. "I was told there would be sweet cakes," he said in a voice that had a mountain in it somewhere, and then he began to cry without sound. They found 2 more children in the buttery, and one under the dais where the carp had been nailed by some long-ago lord for a reason no one liked to recall. They bound the men and fed the children and made beds on the floor, because a bed is the first law any home worth the name writes. Varys had sent them and not sent them. A test, a warning, an apology with teeth. Bronn sent 1 child to the sept with the limping priest and another to the kennels to sleep with dogs because dogs make boys who've never had a mother think they're safe. He sent the man with the lightness out on a wagon to the crossroads with a sign tied to his chest. "I bring fire and am not welcome." He left the scarred one in the stocks and let the village decide whether to throw dung or bring water. He kept the third for words. "What would you have done if you had reached the girl?" Bronn asked him that night by the hearth where there was no audience and the fire's light made men lie less. "Cut her," the man said dully. "Where?" "Face," the man said. "Small, not deep, enough to make a law." "Whose law?" "Anyone's," the man said. "That's the trick." Bronn had him hanged at dawn because some tricks have to be ended with daylight. He did not tell Myrcella beforehand. He sat with her after by the sill where the morning made the stone warm. "You should have told me," she said in a voice that did not accuse, merely measured. "I should have," he said. "I didn't want that face in your head all day. Now it'll only be there half the day." She nodded once. "They will keep coming." "Not if we grow boring," Bronn said. "Bored enemies are the best kind. They wander off to find themselves prettier targets." "They will not find any," she said. "If I have my way." She wrote to Doran in a hand that had learned to be sharp. She wrote, "Your man sent boys. He will say he did not, and perhaps he did not, but his web includes boys who do what they think he wants. I have given 2 beds and dug a hole for a 3rd. I would prefer to dig fewer holes." Doran wrote back, "The spider shakes his web to see which flies fall out. If he shakes where my web hangs too, I will still my web with my hand. A man cannot stop all shaking. He can learn where to put stones." Autumn thinned into a colorless wind and a sky that thought about rain and decided not to. Aegon's banners moved closer to King's Landing like a tide that left gifts and took names. The Tyrell host pulled southward like a cloth being tugged. The Faith beat their chests, clapped their hands, and then timed their prayers to the wagons that came from Stokeworth. Arion sent a letter written as tightly as a laced bodice asking whether Myrcella looked west when she woke or east, whether she slept well, whether she remembered figs. Tristane sent 1 line, "Tell me if you ate an orange today and were content." She did not answer that one. She answered the first 2 questions and left the figs to Dorne to decide were stolen. Jaime returned with road dust instead of river mud and a smell like iron filings in his cloak. He kissed Myrcella's brow in the hall before anyone could pretend it was improper to see him do it. "You look like your father," he said, which was the funniest and cruelest thing a man can tell a girl in a room that holds a queen's shadow. She smiled as if that were a compliment and held his eyes the way one holds a drowning man's hand. "I have no father," she said in the tone of a child reciting a catechism, and then spoiled it by turning a fraction to Bronn. "I have roofs." Jaime and Bronn walked the orchard. "You have made a little court," Jaime said without mockery. "You approve?" Bronn asked. "I approve of anyone who keeps a girl alive in a world that pays to kill them," Jaime said. "I don't approve of everything else, but I've learned that it doesn't matter much what I approve of." "Good lesson," Bronn said. "Learned late." "Everything late," Jaime said. "I meant to be a man by 20 and I am still trying." They spoke of the city, its pressure, its appetites. "It will fall for bread before it falls for banners," Jaime said. "If he starves it, it will open its gates to the first man who throws loaves." "I'll see it doesn't starve," Bronn said. "I like cities noisy. Quiet cities are dead. Once dead, they stay that way for a long time unless someone pushes very hard and then they become something else, and I don't trust that either." "Cersei is making a mess of the parts of it she can reach," Jaime said softly. "She always did," Bronn said. "She will hate you until she dies," Jaime said. "She'll have good company," Bronn said. "I am forming a line. I've started charging for a place in it." In the end, the thing no one could pause came like an unremarkable morning. Thin, cold, eggs not quite warm, a cloud like a hand over the bay. A rider in dust came to the gate. He had no banners and a sword with an old nick in it and an honest mouth. He asked to speak to the Lady of Stokeworth. Myrcella spoke to him on the outer stair so the household could hear because some words are better with witnesses. He told her the city had closed its gates and opened them and closed them again. He said Tyrell men had ridden south as if their horses remembered the road and were making minds up for men. He said a boy with violet-lidded eyes had stood where the kings used to stand and had looked not afraid. He said bread had been tossed into the crowd and had been caught in 100 hands, and the hands had not cared who threw it. "Who throws next?" Myrcella asked. "Whoever can," he said. She looked at the yard and the walls and the pigs and the boys who did not pretend to listen and were listening very much. She looked at Bronn. "We throw," she said. "They threw quietly, which is a kind of miracle. They sent wagons to out hamlets that fed into the city not because the wagons were big but because the paths were, and the paths carry words as well as wheels. They sent to septs where priests kept kettles and to taverns where women did the same with less singing. They wrote the same letter in 2 hands, hers and the septon's, and it said simply, 'This comes from the houses of Stokeworth and Rosby for the people who cannot buy. When soldiers stop you, tell them you are hungry. When priests stop you, tell them you are cold. When any man stops you, tell him the gods are watching. If he does not move, he is a man and not a god. Move him.' It worked badly and therefore well. Wagons were robbed, and guards followed, and fights happened in mean alleys that never see sunlight even in midsummer, and a boy was killed because he cheered in front of a man with a badge. But the wagons mostly moved, and the people mostly ate, and the people's mouths began to say Stokeworth, with something like a laugh hidden inside it. That is the only kind of power that cannot be taken in one night. Cersei sent a letter that smelled of rage like iron and roses. She wrote that she would annul any claim Myrcella made to any title that did not come from a Lannister mouth. She wrote that she would break the doors of Stokeworth and drag my daughter from her bed. Myrcella wrote back, "I am in the hall. The doors are open. Come see." Cersei did not come. She sent Qyburn in a nun's habit with eyes that had forgot to blink. He stood by the door and looked at the lintel, and the herbs hung there and the stone ground smooth by dying men's hands. "You make small places important," he said to Bronn. "I don't care for small places. Go make a big mess somewhere else," Bronn said. "I hesitate to cut threads I cannot see," Qyburn said. "You've tied your knot deep. It will take more pulling than I prefer." He smiled then in that backward way men do when they think they are doing you a favor. "There are diseases in the city I could bring you in a jar. Only a drop, and you would have no more trouble with wagons, with priests, with letters, with men. Thank you, Bronn said. The kitchen's that way. If you try to poison my sausages, I'll feed you to my dogs one finger at a time. Please write that in whatever book you're keeping. Qyburn went away, barefoot to look pious for whomever needed pious looks to judge. The yard forgot him quickly. Bronn did not. He told Tom to watch the well and the bucket rope and the hands that drew it. He told Tuller that no meat came in without passing his nose first. He told the maester to boil what needed boiling and to pray slower over the rest because sometimes prayers are stronger when you're not sure you mean them. Winter peered over the hedge and then chose another lane. It did not come yet, but it wrote a letter on the wind that said it would. Men in the north wrote letters afterward that spoke of flayed men and banners that stank of snow and a king who did not know if he was the king of anything anymore. Bronn glanced and folded them and put them under the leg of a wobbly chair. We'll deal with winter in winter, he said. Now we deal with men. A raven from Dorne bore a seal different from Doran's. Arianne's hand. A sun and spear pressed softer, as if the wax had been warmed too long. She wrote of plays performed in the water gardens for children who had learned to pretend their fathers were home when they were not. She wrote of letters sent to a boy with violet eyes and answers received that sounded like music and not like steel. She asked whether Myrcella could be induced to come south to be safe. Dorne is a long roof, Myrcella said, reading. It leaks when the wind changes. It is also far from people who write letters like your mother, Bronn said. I am tired of distance, she said. I am tired of safe. I prefer practical. We will stay. We will feed. We will wait. Waiting is my best trick, Bronn said. And I've had some good tricks. The waiting gained a shape. Men who had laughed at Stokeworth for being small began to look there to see whether what they were about to do could be done without being chased out with sticks. Small lords came and asked whether their daughters might spend a season for polish, which meant for swords you cannot see. Traders offered salt for storage space and heard no and then lowered their price and heard perhaps. A girl who had run from a wedding wrote her new name upon the ledger and cooked onions as if her life depended on it and was made to wash hands before touching flour because the kitchen was now law. Jaime came one last time before riding to a place where banners whipped themselves stupid and said to Myrcella, "If I die, remember that I loved you and did a poor job of it." He hugged her like a man who understands that sometimes you get to choose who witnesses you being the thing you wish you had been, and then he turned to Bronn. "You keep roofs," he said. "I do," Bronn said. "It's honest work. Everything important is," Jaime said, and they laughed because sometimes men say the right thing and are embarrassed by it. The city changed banners the way a whore changes laces. It was less dramatic than songs would have liked. A boy with old songs in his eyes and a sword none of the old songs had taught him to use well enough stepped onto a dais and spoke a name men wanted to hear because it made them feel the time when their backs had not hurt so much. He spoke it carefully and with grace. He promised things that any child would promise if they were given a crown. Men cheered because bread had arrived that morning and because their wives were looking at them to see whether they would cheer. The faith rearranged the names of their prayers. The lions and the roses counted chairs. The kitchens counted bowls. Stokeworth's wagons did not stop. If the lion roared, the wagons went. If the dragon whispered, the wagons went. When men tried to stop them in the queen's name, they said they had no queen. When men tried to stop them in the king's, they asked which one. Varys returned once, shorter for some reason, heavier in the face, lighter in the step. He looked as if a man had taken off his shirt and found under it a second shirt and put that one on too. He sat again by the kitchen fire and again turned himself into a shadow with a face. "You've done it," he said to no one, as if congratulating himself for a plan someone else had carried. "Done what?" Bronn asked. "Made yourselves too useful," Varys said. "No one will kill you now without asking himself who will handle barley after. That is what I wanted for you. That is also what I fear for you. Men get killed for being useful. It looks cleaner in the story." "I'll settle for messy and alive," Bronn said. "Most of us do," Varys said, and looked at Myrcella with more softness than he wanted anyone to see. "Your scar becomes you," he said. It reminds me of the hand that almost found me, she said. I prefer reminders that teach. And your husband? Varys asked lightly, as if the word were a child playing at the far edge of the room. He is unbearable, she said, and good. The spider inclined his head to that and left a sack of coin large enough to be heavy without being insulting under the bench and disappeared into the yard where the dogs did not bark because they recognized men who move like midnight. The only winter that mattered that year fell one night over the barley like a thin cloth. It crisped what could bear crisping and killed what had been foolish enough to be born too late. In the morning the fields looked older as if they had learned a lesson. Men breathed steam and women beat carpets that had not been beaten because the wind had been kind. The river took on that blackness that means it is thinking about stopping. My roof, Myrcella said on the parapet, looking out over a land that had decided to hold its breath, and Bronn, beside her, grunted because words were not needed there. What's next? She asked after a while, and her breath made a small cloud that drifted into his. The same, he said, always the same. Barley and knives, jokes at the wrong time that turn out to be right, mentions of gods said into cups and then never shouted, keeping boys from making widows by accident, counting. And when dragons come? She asked. We get under the roof, he said, and hope we kept it watered enough it doesn't catch. If it burns, she said, then we build another, he said. She laughed once in that sudden way that turns heads in a hall and said, Good. I am good at building things other people forget they need. He had never thought to love anything that was not a coin, a blade, or a quiet corner, not in the way that made men foolish. He did not love her like a man loves a girl. He loved her like a hedge loves the wall it grows along, because it gives it shape and keeps it honest and tells the wind to go around. He loved, also, the way his own name sounded on tongues that had once spit when they said it and now did not. He loved the dogs because dogs are simple. He loved the maester's chain for the noise it made when the man leaned over his ledger in the middle of the night and no one else was awake. He loved the way Tom's arrows found the place he had told them to find. He loved that Tuller had learned to cut meat thin enough to feed 3 men from a piece that once fed 2, and that he was proud of this as if he'd taken a keep. When war came again, it came not in banners but in distance, the way war usually comes. Prices slid. Tempers slid. Snow came and pretended to be a friend and then went away and left mud that was not. Letters arrived with seals and without. A face he had not wanted to see appeared by the chestnut tree at dusk. Peter Baelish, neat as a blade and smelling of feathers. It takes real art to turn Stokeworth into a house that matters, Littlefinger said, hands tucked, smile tucked deeper.
I admire artykuł.
There's a bench, Bronn said. Sit if your coin can hold you up. I bring an offer, Baelish said, ignoring the nudge. I control gullies and girls and gulls. I know which way wind blows through Ares and through ears. I can move men without moving a foot. Give me your wagons for a season. I will make you richer than honesty ever made any man. I'm already richer than honesty makes most men, Bronn said. I'm trying a new thing. I'm trying the long way where you don't run every time someone blows on your house with their mouth. Ah, Baelish said. You're trying virtue. Dangerous habit. Safer than trusting men who sell ladders with missing rungs, Bronn said. The next rung's always the one you need. Littlefinger's eyes laughed for him. She will not thank you forever, he said, nodding toward where Myrcella had gone to hear a woman complain of a hen that had learned to crow. She will outgrow this. She will want a chair with dragons carved into it and songs that make men cry. She will want to make a law and have it obeyed 3 valleys away. Then your sausages will seem small. Then I'll make more, Bronn said. You are infuriating, Baelish said, softened by enjoyment. It's almost a gift. You are a man who has never been satisfied with eating, Bronn said. I wouldn't trade places. They let him go because some men cannot be contained without becoming the problem you said you were avoiding. He left a shadow that looked like a grin and a promise that the veil would tilt at a time of his choosing. He would. Men like him always find a way to tilt something. When the snows finally did come with honesty, They laid their hands on the city and the small towns like Stokeworth without the malice men bring. They simply sat, heavy and bright. Bronn watched a boy the age of a former little bird teach a younger boy to keep a path between by stamping feet and thought that if gods existed, perhaps that was the kind of prayer they liked best. Stamping feet, stubbornness, breath made visible and still coming. He tightened a rope around a tarp over the last of the apples, told Tuller to salt the last pig, told Tom to fletch arrows in front of the hearth so the glue would set true, and told the maester to write down each name on the list of old ones and lonely ones so they would be checked before the soup was poured into bowls. A raven came with a feathery smudge of Dorn's orange wax. Doran's writing liked winter. It came taut, not tremulous. He wrote, "My leg hurts and the sea is indifferent and my brother is long and my son is short and I am short of patience. Also, the boy with the old name will learn that a city resists because it must. If he is wise, he will sit. If he is not, he will find that sitting is sometimes what kills men who prefer to move. Arian wants to ride north. I tell her to stay. If she rides, you will see her. If you see her, tell her that the thing she wants is the thing she does not get by wanting. Tell her also that figs will be rare." It was as much a plan as Doran ever wrote in a letter. Said, "Keep steady." Said, "When others run, slow." Myrcella folded the letter as carefully as if it were a dress she would wear again and again until it frayed. She went to the hall and stood with the ledger open like a sermon. "Today," she said to the room, "we count boots. Tomorrow we count bread. The day after that we count names. If you have more than one pair of boots, bring one to the dais. You'll get your name written with a star. If you need boots, come after. We will not have cold feet in this hall while we have leather." There was a little laughter because people laugh when someone talks like a mother and also like a captain. The boots piled. The names were written. Bronn put his thumb on a certain line and felt it press back, as if the words had acquired weight in the world. That is, all laws are words with weight. One night in deep winter a sound came that was not snow, not dog, not man. It was a horn, but low, borrowed from something older. It came from the east where the river goes soft. Tom went up the wall with his cloak over his mouth and came down with frost on his lashes and said, "Ships small, not ironborn, hard men, hungry eyes. Hungry eyes are the worst kind to meet in winter." Bronn took 20 men and met them at the frozen strand where ice scrubbed the shore and made new shapes for boys to put feet on foolishly. Their leader wore a cloak that had been nice once and a beard that had seen salt. Behind him 12 men looked like nothing and thus like trouble. Their banners showed an old chain broken. Sellswords turned shore rats or shore rats turned sellswords. "You'll not be landing here," Bronn said as if offering them broth. "You'll not be landing there either," he added, pointing to the next village's frozen piers. "If you land with steel in your hands and hunger in your eyes, you will leave with none and less." "We have coin," the leader said. "Do you have patience?" Bronn asked. The man scratched his beard. "We have hunger." "Then you have impatience," Bronn said. "Pick a man to come with me. He may have bread and soup. If he speaks honestly the second time I ask him a question, he may have a job and a room by a hearth. If he lies, I will cut off his fingers one at a time and throw them on the ice and see whether the gulls prefer left or right." It was not a speech the seven would set into glass, but it had the virtue of being the language men with old trouble understand. They sent a man forward whose one ear had an old bite. He took the bread. He told the truth the second time. They signed what passes for a pact in winter, stacked palms over a bowl of stew. The 12 men became 8 who stayed to haul carts and dig ice, and 4 who left with coin they did not deserve instead of with blood on the snow. The ships slid away. The horn sounded once more, softer, and was gone. Myrcella did not praise him. She did not need to. She set a bowl in front of him at the end of the day when his fingers had lost feeling and said, "You chose right. It was the cheaper choice," he said. "Those are often the best," she said. When spring took 2 steps toward them and 1 backward and then decided to stay, a girl with hair like mud after rain came to the hall and asked for work. She carried a bundle with care and, when asked to show what she cared for, unwrapped it to reveal 3 dozen crossbow bolts with fletching done neat and same. "My father fletched until his eyes were not good enough for a man who paid," she said. "He taught me, 'I'll do for bread. You'll do for honor,'" Myrcella said. And if any man in the hall felt his heart twinge at a queen's tone come out of a girl's mouth, he kept it to himself. The bolts would one day be used on men who had letters and seals. The girl would one day be asked to make a choice between a job and a vow, and she would choose the vow. In the moment, it was a bowl of stew and a place by a fire. That is how walls are built. Stone by stone, stew by stew, name by name, and sometimes rope by rope. On a day when the wind was flat and the sky high and white as if it had swallowed a ship's sail, Bronn took a rope and a hammer and went up the east wall where he had told Tom months ago the mortar was crumbling. He went because a man who gives an order ought to know what the work feels like. He hefted stones and felt the infinity of doing a small thing that makes a bigger thing remain. He hammered and thought of birds and crowns and knives under robes and a boy who had asked about sweet cakes while attempting to kill a girl and the way the world tries to be simple and never manages it. He smiled the way a man smiles when he is not observed and hammered again. Below, in the yard, Myrcella listened to a farmer's impossible grief and gave him the only remedy anyone can give another human in such a moment: her time. The maester wrote a name and wiped his quill and wrote another. Tom strung a bough. Tuller invented a new spice from something he'd thought was a weed. A dog slept with its nose on its paws and wagged in its sleep at a bone it had earned that day and would earn again the next. Across the narrow sea, a woman with a crown of ideas and a roomful of dragons set a hand upon her brow and said the word Westeros, like a benediction and a threat. In King's Landing, a boy with a name like a story practiced writing it big so that it would fit the walls his people expected. In the north, Snow debated with fire and came to no conclusion. In Dorne, a prince closed his eyes and opened them, and a woman too clever for her comfort wrote too many letters and burned 3 of them after sealing. In the Vale, a man counted coins and smiles and decided which weighed more that week. In Stokeworth, Bronn swung the hammer. The rope creaked, the stone held, the hinge did not squeal, the roof did not leak. He had, for the moment, enough. He had a country in miniature that worked. He had the trust of a girl who would never be a girl again because she had decided to be something harder first. He had men who could be heavy when needed and light when that was wiser. He had a kitchen and a ledger and a set of laws that would make any king who read them yawn and then steal them. He went down the ladder when the sun had made his neck prickle and found Myrcella with ink on her scar again. He brushed it off with his thumb. She didn't flinch. He told her a joke about a lord who had forgotten his own wife's name and remembered every line in the book that proved he owned her. She smiled, not because the joke was good but because he had tried. That is also how roofs are kept. The night came, and the moon was small and honest, and he lay awake listening to the house breathe. He thought of the first time he had said yes to a vow and the way his mouth had felt strange around the word. He thought of the way the word had grown less strange. He thought of the boy who had asked for sweet cakes and decided he would build a room where boys could eat without being asked to kill for the privilege. He would call it something men could dislike without noticing they were helping it. Storehouse, perhaps. Men like to fund storehouses. They think of grain, not boys. Sleep came as it does when the roof holds and when even your enemies have gone to their beds. He drifted with the sense of a coin turning on his knuckles, an old trick that never loses its pleasure. In the morning there would be boots to count, barley to weigh, letters to ignore, and letters to answer. There would be a day when all of this would end because the world decides that small honest things must step aside for large dishonest ones. He would not worry it now. He had learned this. The only days that make any difference are the days you can touch. He reached out, found the stone under his bed, pressed his palm to it, felt it answer with its dumb, generous firmness, and slept.